Welcome back to the medieval ages, where people jousted and threw apples at one another and other haunting stuff. I don't know, I'm thinking of Wizard of Oz. That's kind of medieval times, right? It's close enough. Here are the top 10 messed up Dark Age punishments that will absolutely freak you out. Starting our list off at number 10, don't steal crops. In medieval times, stealing crops was considered a very serious crime, as funny as it may seem in your head. See a guy grab a vegetable and run away. Crops were a vital source of food and income for farmers and communities. There's no Uber Eats back then, alright? Somebody steals your tomatoes, you're fucked. In some cases, the punishment might be a fine or restitution paid for the victim, while in more serious cases, the thief might be subjected to public humiliation or physical punishment, such as whipping or branding. Yeah, branding somebody publicly, all because you ate the wrong apple off the wrong tree. Repeat offenders might, of course, face more severe punishments because something's afoot here, okay? We're not buying your story this time. Such as imprisonment or banishment from the community. Yeah, banishment. Just get out of here. Next village. See ya. Overall, stealing crops was not taken lightly in medieval society at all, and it could result in significant consequences for the offender. Branded, getting branded because you stole a crop. That's embarrassing almost. Number 9, don't steal at all. Yeah, let's rewind the clocks back a bit more. Don't take anything ever. How's that sound? Sweden's Bjarki laws were a set of Viking-era laws that governed maritime trade and piracy. Now, they were enacted in 832 AD, pretty old school, and they included punishments for various crimes, including theft and piracy. The punishment for stealing in a Viking society, it of course varied depending on the severity of the crime, the value of the stolen goods, and or the social status of the offender. But for minor thefts, the offender might be required to pay restitution or make amends to the victim. This could involve returning the stolen goods, paying a fine to them directly, or performing a service for them. You're basically a slave for them. For more serious offenses, such as repeated thefts or stealing from a chieftain, the punishment might be more harsh. And this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of our list. Here, the offender might be stripped of their social status, exiled from the community, or even killed, the worst of the worst. Now, in some cases, the punishment for stealing could also involve public shaming. That in the Viking era, I don't even want to know what that would look like. The offender might be paraded through the community or subjected to other forms of humiliation. Yeah, we'll get to the lung stuff a little bit later on. Slowly but surely we'll get there. You have to start at theft and then work our way to the lunging and the horrible knee-breaking stuff. Number 8, arson. Capital punishment was a common punishment for arson in the medieval age. Sounds a bit harsh, but hear me out. Last time I was on this channel, I was talking about the Great Fire of 1666. It took 15 lives, but ultimately this fire, it forced officials to rebuild a great part of the city, restructured everything. This changed history. Fire in medieval towns equals trouble. It's gonna spread quite fast. A lot of wood, a lot of woody stuff. So if you were found guilty for arson, well, buddy, you're screwed. Arson, the deliberate setting of fire to property, it was considered a serious crime and was often punished severely in order to deter others from committing similar crimes, right? In some cases, arsonists were killed by hanging or they were burned themselves at the stake. Yeah, burning at the stake was a particularly gruesome form of capital punishment in which the accused was tied to a post or a stake and then they were set on fire. Again, this was all a public affair. People came out to watch this. Horrible. Horrible. Hide your eyes. We're not going to watch this one. Number 7, amputation. While amputation was not a common punishment in Viking societies, there are historical accounts of it being used in extreme cases of punishment, which is absolutely crazy. I'll tell you 2 of them. One example is the story of Orm of Lyre, who was a wealthy farmer in Norway during the 11th century. Now Orm, old Orm here, he was accused of multiple killings, including the killing of a chieftain, and was sentenced to have his hands and his feet amputated. Yeah, you can't kill anyone when you don't have any mitts, apparently. This was a severe punishment that was reserved for the most serious of the most serious, and it was intended to permanently disable the offender and hopefully prevent them from committing further crimes. Example number 2, Edvin Knifri. He was a wealthy farmer, again, another farmer in rough times. He was a wealthy farmer in Iceland during the 10th century. Now Edvin, he was accused of stealing cattle, and as a punishment, his nose and his ears were cut off. Do you hear that? That's Edvin's ears getting cut off. It's horrible. I can't show it, but I can definitely act it. This form of punishment was intended to publicly shame the offender and serve as a warning to others. Yeah, I see Edvin over there. Old non-ear Edvin. That's why you don't steal. Number 6, slavery. Slavery, of course, was a common practice in Viking or medieval societies, and it was often used as a punishment for crimes such as theft, piracy, and debt. As I said earlier, if you steal enough stuff, You owe people far too much. Now they own you. According to the Bjarki laws, a set of Viking era laws governed in 832, I mentioned that earlier as well, individuals who were unable to pay their debts could and will be sold into slavery. Yeah, you gotta pay some way. Vikings also engaged in the slave trade. They captured individuals during these raids and they sold them as slaves in markets across Europe and the Middle East. Slavery was an integral part of the Viking economy, and many Viking households had slaves actively who were performing various tasks such as farming, household chores, and even military service. The treatment of slaves in Viking societies varied depending on the individual owner, but slaves were generally considered property and had few legal rights. Yeah, we don't look at that often when we look at medieval history. We often just imagine guys like me with big beards, you know? Number 5, the Ordeal by Fire. Also known as Trial by Fire, this one's a little bit different than being burned at the stake. Dare I say it's a bit worse? I don't know, it's certainly gonna last longer, which is worse in my opinion. This one here was a Viking punishment that involved subjecting the accused, this individual, to a test of endurance, we can call it. They had to walk barefoot over hot coals, or they had to hold hot iron in their bare hands. The belief here was that if the accused was innocent, they would be unharmed by this boiling hot fire, whereas if they were guilty, well then, and only then, would they burn and suffer. This punishment was not unique to Vikings. It was used in various forms throughout history, medieval history. It was huge in medieval Europe. They loved that. They loved Ordeal by Fire, so that was a good time. Ancient India as well, they would perform such a task. However, there's some evidence to suggest that the Vikings may have used the Ordeal by Fire as a form of punishment and trial. For example, the Icelandic sagas, which are a collection of stories and history from medieval Iceland, they describe the use of Ordeal by Fire in legal proceedings, which, again, imagine being born in that era. Like, this is what you have to go and watch. I can't even watch UFC. I can't watch this guy burn. Are you kidding me? In one story, a woman was accused of adultery and then she was forced to walk barefoot over hot coals as part of her trial. Yeah, she emerged unharmed and was declared innocent, believe it or not. I choose not to believe that. I believe her feet were absolutely f***ed, but hey, who am I? Number 4, getting even. Taking another's life. Yeah, can't get much worse than that, can it? Nowadays, if you kill somebody, it's a bit different. Now you'll get out early with good behavior, and then Netflix will do 4 miniseries all about you. Yeah, nice. You get your own Netflix special. Love it. Back in the Bjarki laws in the medieval Viking era, taking another's life was considered one of the most serious crimes, and the punishment for doing so varied depending on the circumstances of the crime, but, well, it was all bad, wasn't it? Back then, if the killer was caught in the act, they could be killed, well, on the spot by the victim's family or by the community. Over in 14 minutes flat, everyone goes home. No trial, nothing. If the killer was caught after the fact, they were typically subjected to a fine known as a weregild, which was paid to the victim's family as compensation for the loss of their dearly loved one. And if the killer was unable to pay the fee, they could be subjected to other forms of punishment, including exile or even execution. Exile was brutal as well. You were declared an outlaw, then you were banished from Viking society with no legal protections or rights. This often led to you living in the wilderness, and that's terrifying, and that's lonely, and that lasts a while, and that's horrific. In some cases, the victim's family could also choose to enact vengeance on the murderer themselves rather than relying on the legal system. This could lead to a cycle of violence and revenge known as a blood feud that could last for generations. That's crazy. That sounds like it's something from a Batman comic. A cycle of revenge that could last generations? My God, let it go, Bruce. Number 3, treason. Treason was defined broadly, and it could include acts such as plotting against the king or queen, engaging in rebellion or insurrection, or providing aid to the enemy during wartime. Don't be a little snake, basically. Just don't do any of the above. The punishment for treason varied depending on the specific circumstances of the crime and which country it was committed. Now, this one's quite broad. You never know where you're gonna get, basically. In some cases, the punishment could be as bad as getting hanged or drawing and quartering, which, if you don't know, that would involve you being hung and then accused until nearly dead, and then disemboweling them and cutting off their limbs before displaying the body parts publicly as a warning to others. So it's the worst thing you've ever heard, pretty much. In other cases, the punishment for treason could include imprisonment, which is the most normal sounding thing on this list, banishment, or simply a fine. Yeah, here you go, I'm gonna write that for you. Don't do that again. In some cases, the accused might be given the opportunity to plea for mercy and be granted a lesser punishment. I would plea so hard. I'd be the most pleasant, hard-pleading peasant in all of the land. That would be over so quick. I would beg. The severity of the punishment for treason reflected the belief that the crime was a threat to the stability and security of the state, and you can't really f with that. Medieval society highly valued loyalty to the monarch and the state, and acts of treason were seen as a direct challenge to all of this loyalty. So as a result, treason was punished harshly in order to deter others from committing anything similar. Yeah, don't f with medieval times anywhere, anytime, anyone, at all. Period. Number 2, rats. In medieval times, rats were often seen as a symbol of disease and filth, and they were blamed for the spread of epidemics such as, the Black Death, stuff like that. Gross little hairballs. As a result, rats were sometimes used in punishments in order to deter others from committing crimes because, well, they're disgusting. Nobody wants that to happen to them, right? One common punishment was to tie a rat to a person's body, place a metal bucket over top, heat up said bucket so the rat is then forced to burrow into the victim's flesh to escape. Pretty horrible, but it gets worse. Other punishments involving rats included throwing rats at a person's face, which kind of hilarious, kind of horrible, or forcing them to eat a live rat. Both of these sound like fear factor challenges. That is insane. You get caught stealing now, you have to eat a rat. Can you imagine that? So gross. I would rather do the time than have a rat get hucked at my face. Thank you so much, Judge. And finally, number 1, the cupbearer. We'll finish with one of the worst jobs to have in medieval times. This one's not a punishment per se, but it's too funny to leave out. This job would make me so anxious. Oh my gosh. In medieval times, a cupbearer was a highly trusted servant in a noble household or court. Now, the cupbearer was responsible for the care and presentation of the lord or milady's beverages, ensuring that they were of high quality and served in appropriate vessels. Vessels where you can do this a lot. I know kings and queens like to do this a lot when they're giving their monologues. The cupbearer was also responsible for monitoring the lord or lady's health, as their beverage could be laced with, you guessed it, poison. Yeah, gotta watch out for that, I hope. The cupbearer was often a position of great influence and power, as they, of course, had access to the lord or lady at all times, and could potentially use their position to manipulate history and gain favor with the ruling class. That would suck one day, wouldn't it? You take a sip and you're like, oh, that's actually poison. This one's my last shift. That really sucks. Didn't think that would happen today. Those are the top 10 messed up Dark Age punishments that will freak you out. I hope I freaked you out a little bit. I've been your host, Mr. Beard McWaters, and when I come back next time, I'll hopefully look like Father Time. Who knows? This is so new. I don't know what to do. Bye.